The morning mist still clung to the fields when Clint Turner spotted the first string of fairy lights glittering against the rising sun. At first, he thought the dew was playing tricks on his eyes. But as he stepped onto the gravel path leading toward the far end of his property, his boots crunching through frost-tipped grass, the truth revealed itself. Someone was decorating his hay barn. He stopped short near the fence post and stared. A white canopy arched across the barn's wide entrance. Folding chairs lined up in military precision. Gold-trimmed banners fluttered in the breeze like smug little flags of occupation. Two men in polos and earpieces were unloading what looked like a 5-tier wedding cake from a refrigerated van. Clint's jaw tightened. The Turner hay barn was no ordinary structure. Built by his great-grandfather in 1912, it had stood for over a century, surviving storms, termites, and 2 wildfires. It was more than just aged timber and rusted hinges. It was a symbol of the Turner family's roots, and Clint had spent the last 5 years restoring it. Though still a working barn during the week, on weekends it became an event space, hosting everything from harvest dances to charity races. And this Saturday, it was booked for the Hay Buster Mud Run, a long-standing tradition and a favorite among local families. This was not part of the plan. He marched down the gravel, past the gawking decorators, until a sharp voice sliced the air. "Oh, Clint." Perfect timing. Karen Whitlock emerged from the side of the barn, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched atop her immaculately styled blonde bob. She wore a linen suit far too clean for farm life and a smile that seemed chemically sealed to her face. Clint didn't return it. "What the hell is going on here, Karen?" She clapped her hands, undeterred. "Isn't it marvelous? The transformation is just," she spun theatrically, gesturing at the decor, "divine. I knew your barn had potential, Clint. It just needed the right touch." He stared at her dumbfounded. "You can't be serious." Her smile didn't waver. "Oh, don't be grumpy. It's just for one day. My cousin's getting married, and the venue downtown fell through. I saved the day, and you should be thanking me. This will put your barn on the map." "My barn's already on the map," he growled. "It's booked. The Hay Buster Mud Run. Saturday morning. We've got over 100 people signed up. Kids, vets, the whole town." Karen rolled her eyes and waved a manicured hand like she was swatting away a fly. "I rescheduled it." Clint blinked. "You what?" "I spoke with someone on your website. Well, left a message and moved the race to next weekend. There's no need to be difficult." His blood boiled. "You don't have the authority to move anything. This isn't HOA land. This barn sits on Turner property, has for over 100 years. You're trespassing." Karen's tone shifted slightly, but her posture remained imperious. "Clint, don't be provincial. This wedding is important to the community's image. Willow Ridge is trying to cultivate a certain reputation, and this barn will be the crown jewel." He took a step closer. "Karen, listen carefully. You're not in Willow Ridge anymore. This barn isn't a part of your little fiefdom. I've got signed permits, insurance, and a schedule. And in case you forgot, mud runs require mud. You won't like what happens to those white tablecloths once we start the pumps." Karen laughed, but it rang hollow. "You wouldn't dare sabotage a wedding." Clint didn't blink. "Watch me." She hesitated. The smile faltered. "Only for a second. I've already sent the invitations," she said softly. "The guests are coming. Tomorrow. And the runners will be here Saturday morning. Right on time." Their eyes locked in a quiet standoff, tension humming between them like a taut wire. "Clint," she said, voice dropping an octave, "you do this and you'll regret it. I have pull." "I don't care how many committees you chair," he replied. "You mess with my land, and I'll make sure you never forget where the line is drawn." She narrowed her eyes but didn't respond. He turned and walked away, boots heavy with anger. Behind him, the wedding preparations continued, but Clint wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Clint stood at the edge of the barn the next morning, watching as Karen's army of wedding planners set to work. He could hear the rhythmic clinking of metal tools, the hum of chattering voices, and the unmistakable swoosh of fabric being draped across beams. The entire barn had been transformed overnight into what looked like a high-end wedding venue, far removed from the rustic charm he had painstakingly restored. It was too much. Too sudden. Too...
Karen.
Clint's hand clenched around the railing. She wasn't just stepping on his toes. She was bulldozing through everything that made this farm his. This barn wasn't some little piece of property to be rented out for whoever could afford to take it. It was his grandfather's legacy, the place where his family had raised cattle, stacked hay, and built memories. But Karen didn't care about any of that. She saw only what she wanted to see, the pristine vision of a gated community and a clean reputation. As Clint paced in front of the barn, Jenna Dawson, local race coordinator and Clint's childhood friend, pulled up in her truck. She jumped out, flashing a quick grin. "Is this some sort of joke?" she asked, tilting her head toward the wedding setup. "I thought you said nothing would move without a fight." Clint didn't return her smile. "She thinks she can just waltz in and take over. Doesn't even care that we've got this event locked down for weeks." Jenna took a deep breath, eyes scanning the scene. "Yeah, well, it's not like we don't have a few tricks up our sleeves, right?" Clint looked at her. "It's not just about the race, Jenna. She's trying to change everything, this whole community. She wants to turn this place into a shiny, pristine replica of Willow Ridge. And we're the ones caught in the middle." Jenna's smile faded, replaced by a quiet intensity. "I get it. This isn't just about the barn. It's about standing up to her."
Exactly.
"But she's got the HOA behind her. Her word is law, and she's using it like a weapon. People are too afraid to challenge her." Clint's voice thickened with frustration. "The last thing I want to do is turn this into a war, but if I let her walk all over me now, I'll lose everything." Jenna nodded. "You're not alone in this. The town knows what she's doing. It's time we put a stop to it." Clint glanced back toward the barn, where Karen's team was busy hanging decorative garlands. He could see her, directing traffic as though she owned the place, and the sight made his blood boil. It wasn't just the barn. Karen had already begun making her mark on Willow Ridge. New rules about lawn care, fines for unsightly sheds, and 100 other small, insidious changes were strangling the life out of the land Clint loved. And now she was trying to control his legacy. The whole thing felt like a slow-moving nightmare. "We can't back down," Clint said. "We've got the mud run scheduled, and I'm not moving it for anyone. Not even for Karen Whitlock." Jenna crossed her arms, her gaze hardening with resolve. "You're right. Let's see how far she's willing to go when the community shows up." Clint smiled, a rare glint of defiance lighting his eyes. "This is our land. She doesn't get to dictate what happens here. Not without a fight." As the day wore on, Clint worked with Jenna and a few other volunteers, preparing for the mud run despite Karen's wedding preparations. They set up the obstacles, laid down the tarp, and pumped the mud into the pits, all while Karen's wedding crew continued to bustle around. Clint watched as she strode back and forth, clipboard in hand, barking orders at her staff. But it was clear she wasn't in control anymore. The afternoon sun beat down as the wedding party began to trickle in. The first guests arrived in stiff, expensive clothes that looked entirely out of place on a farm. They looked confused, glancing at the muddy pit in front of them, unsure of how to navigate the scene. Clint watched it all from a distance, a satisfied smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. The moment the wedding guests saw the mud run set up in full force, he knew things were going to get complicated. They were going to have to choose sides, whether they supported the pristine vision Karen had for the neighborhood or the genuine, messy, and unapologetic farm life that Clint had worked his whole life to preserve. As Karen's guests began to gather, Clint decided it was time to take the next step. His mind was made up. He wasn't going to let this conflict simmer any longer. He marched up to Karen, who was directing her floral arrangements with such confidence she looked like a queen ruling over her kingdom. "Karen," Clint called out sharply, drawing her attention. "We need to talk." She turned to him, her smile faltering when she saw the determined look on his face. "Clint, we've already talked about this. I'm not going to waste any more time arguing. My wedding is happening here, today, and there's nothing you can do about it." Clint squared his shoulders. "You've made a mistake, Karen. This barn isn't yours to take. And neither is this land. You've pushed too far this time. I'm not backing down. Karen's face flushed with frustration. You're going to regret this. Clint stood his ground. We'll see about that. The tension in the air was palpable, the clash of wills as inevitable as the storm that was surely coming. The first clash came not with words, but with water. At precisely 8 a.m., the diesel-powered pump kicked to life beside the Turner barn. A thick hose hissed to life, and a heavy stream of water surged into the first mud pit. Within minutes, the lower field began to darken, softening under the weight of moisture as earth transformed into slush. Karen's shriek echoed through the crisp morning air. "Turn that thing off," she howled, storming across the lawn in a cream satin robe, clutching her cell phone like a weapon. "You're ruining the landscaping." Clint stood beside the pump, arms crossed, face unreadable. "This is the landscaping, Karen. We've got permits, a confirmed schedule, and 70 participants arriving by 10. She gaped at him as if he'd just declared war. "Do you have any idea how much this wedding cost?" she snapped, her voice rising. "My cousin's entire in-law family is here. There are senators on that guest list, Clint. You're humiliating me." "Not my problem," he said coolly. "I told you 2 days ago, this barn was never yours to take. You ignored me. Now you get to deal with the consequences." Karen's mouth opened, then shut again. Behind her, wedding guests in tailored suits and stiletto heels watched from under the tent with wary fascination. The muddy field in front of them looked like an alien landscape, especially with volunteers hauling ropes, tires, and hay bales into place. It wasn't long before the runners arrived. They came in herds, kids, college students, veterans, and locals, decked out in neon shirts and bandanas, laughing as they lined up at the registration booth. Jenna was directing traffic, clipboard in hand, as though nothing unusual was happening. Every minute that ticked by pulled more focus away from the wedding preparations and toward the growing spectacle of the mud run. Karen stormed back toward her tent, fuming. Inside, her cousin, still in rollers and a half-done face of makeup, was staring out the window at the chaos. "Karen, what's going on? This wasn't part of the plan." "I'm handling it," Karen snapped. "Just give me a moment." But it was slipping. All of it. She had crafted a perfect vision. Instagram-worthy backdrops, a catered menu with personalized cocktail stirrers, even a live string quartet. And now it was being buried, quite literally, in mud and noise and the unshakable scent of farmland rebellion. Back outside, Clint spotted Karen pacing on her phone, barking into it, likely calling the HOA board or the sheriff, or both. He wasn't worried. The permits were airtight, and Jenna had already filed the route map with the county clerk. If anyone was operating illegally, it was Karen. At 9:30 sharp, the race horn blared. A wave of runners charged forward, splashing through the first trench and tumbling over a wall of hay bales. Cheers and laughter rang out across the field. Someone fired up a Bluetooth speaker, and the bass thudded in the air like a war drum. The barn's wide doors were open, lined with volunteers handing out water bottles and high fives. And then it happened. A groomsman, distracted by the crowd, tried to cross the field to snap a selfie. He made it 2 steps before slipping into a muddy ditch with a spectacular splat. A collective gasp echoed from the wedding tent, followed by an uncontrollable ripple of laughter from the runners. Clint didn't laugh, but he didn't hide the smirk either. Karen, however, was livid. She marched up to Clint, eyes blazing. "You've ruined this. You think you've won something here?" Clint leaned in, voice calm but firm. "This isn't about winning. It's about standing up to you. You thought you could rewrite the rules just because you're used to getting your way. But out here, respect is earned, not taken." Karen's jaw trembled. "You'll regret this. I'll have the HOA file a grievance. I'll sue. On what grounds?" he cut in. "Trespassing on my property? Hijacking an event without permission? You'd lose everything in discovery." For the first time since she'd arrived, Karen faltered. Behind them, the sound of runners cheering as they launched into a mud pit drowned out the string quartet, which had fallen silent. Guests began drifting toward the chaos, some even filming on their phones. One of the bridesmaids had kicked off her heels and was helping a child dig a trench for fun. Karen stood in the middle of it all, wedding dreams unraveling around her and not a soul rushing to her defense. Clint met her glare with quiet resolve. "You should have just asked." She turned and walked away. The wedding was not canceled, but it was certainly transformed. By mid-afternoon, the Turner barn looked like a battlefield from two different worlds. On one side, folding chairs askew, soaked flower arrangements wilting under the weight of rising humidity, and a wedding cake half-melted under a plastic canopy. On the other, cheering runners, mud-caked faces, and the triumphant energy of a community that had decided, unapologetically, to take its land back. Clint stood by the finish line, handing out medals stamped with a crude silhouette of a tractor and the words "Willow Ridge Mud Run. We don't quit." Jenna approached with a tired but satisfied grin, wiping her hands on a towel. "Well," she said, motioning toward the field, "I think we made our point." Clint nodded, louder than any board meeting ever could. As the final runners crossed, a round of applause surged through the crowd. Some of the wedding guests, now barefoot and curious, had wandered over and joined in. A few had even volunteered to help tear down the makeshift obstacles, laughter breaking down the social walls that Karen had built. Speaking of Karen, she was nowhere in sight. Her husband-to-be had left in a rental car hours earlier, shaking his head and muttering something about chaotic energy. Guests trickled out, their expressions a mixture of amusement and second-hand embarrassment. And just like that, her carefully curated, $40,000 wedding had ended not in champagne toasts, but in sopping linen and public humiliation. But Clint wasn't done. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the ridge and long shadows stretched across the farm, Clint walked into the HOA office. It was located in the fancy new clubhouse Karen had insisted be built next to the artificial lake, ironically, on land Clint had leased to the HOA 10 years ago for a symbolic $1. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Mr. Turner, the board isn't meeting tonight." "I'm not here to talk," Clint said, pulling a thick manila envelope from under his arm and placing it on the desk. "I'm here to file formal documentation revoking all public event permissions on my property, effective immediately." The receptionist blinked. "You mean the clubhouse?" Clint nodded. "The lease Karen bragged about? It was month to month. I'm reclaiming it. They've got 30 days. He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and if anyone wants to challenge it, they'll need to meet me in county court. I've already spoken to my lawyer." By the time the board found out, the decision had already gone public. Jenna, of course, had posted the mud run's triumph all over the town's Facebook page. Within hours, photos and videos went viral. People loved the story. Small-town farmer stands up to HOA tyrant, uses legal muscle and a mud pit to reclaim his land. Even the local news picked it up. The backlash was swift. Board members began distancing themselves from Karen. A motion was filed for her removal as chair. And though she fought, tooth and nail, to maintain control, her once loyal allies quietly backed out. She wasn't just unpopular now, she was radioactive. A week later, Clint received a knock on his front porch. He opened the door to find Karen, dressed plainly, no pearls, no entourage. Just her and a paper envelope. She handed it over silently. "Settlement paperwork," she muttered. "Dropping all claims, relinquishing any pending permits, and withdrawing from the HOA board. Effective immediately." Clint took the envelope without a word. She lingered, eyes scanning the porch like she wanted to say more, but there was nothing left to say. As she turned to leave, Clint called out, "You could have just respected the land. That's all anyone ever wanted." Karen paused. "I thought I was fixing things. Making them better." "For who?"
Clint asked.
She didn't answer. That night, Clint sat under the stars with Jenna and a few of the volunteers, sipping beer around a crackling fire pit outside the barn. The mud had dried, but the spirit lingered. Raw, unfiltered, proud. The kind of feeling that didn't need a ribbon cutting or permission from a committee. Jenna leaned back in her chair. So what now? Clint grinned. Next year's mud run needs a bigger course. Thinking we cut right through that fake lake by the clubhouse. Everyone laughed. Because in Willow Ridge, power didn't come from rules printed on HOA paper. It came from history, from grit, and from people who didn't fold when told to bow. And if anyone forgot that again, they knew just where to find the mud.